Hello and welcome to Unapologetic, the UK's podcast on politics, news and stuff. So, I'm Sam.
From a writer centre viewpoint?
Well, I wasn't sure if you're supposed to say that or not. I couldn't remember. I thought I said it before.
It's been so long since we've done a podcast.
Yeah.
I'm Steve.
So, it's been ages. Kind of Brexit has kind of come and gone. It's the 31st now. So, first thing really is elections been called for the 12th of December. Most of us thought we'd never ever get there, and we still nearly didn't when Labour was trying to put in amendments to allow EU citizens and 16-year-olds to vote. So I suppose, what do you think about it all? Who's going to win? What's going to happen? Who knows?
Who knows indeed. So you're telling me that we're not leaving today?
No, apparently not. Let's be leaving the
It's
next.
the first I've heard about this. You're telling me we've got an election now?
3 hours and 10 minutes.
Oh my God. No, of course we knew about it. But I don't know. I think, we guessed, didn't we? We made guesses in our previous podcasts as to what was going to happen, and I did think at that point that we were going to get it through. But
what's this? You were wrong?
yeah, it looks like I was. I just thought, that I thought Boris had a trick up his sleeve. I just had a feeling that he knew some legal mechanism that he was going to pull out at the last minute. Or actually, what I would have liked to see is him say, come and arrest me. I'm the Prime Minister. I'm keeping my promise. But yeah, I don't know really about the legalities of Parliament, and it's all way above our pay grade, isn't it? So I don't feel too bad about getting it wrong. But I've got to say, general election, really? Oh my goodness.
Yeah. It's a lot of campaigning, a lot of walking. It's going to be interesting to see what happens as well, because there's a few interesting seats to watch. So there's one in Scotland where the SNP candidate has a majority of 2 behind the Lib Dems, so that's going to be an interesting one to watch. And even Boris is actually, people are saying, it's going to be interesting because he's only got a majority of about 5,000.
Yeah, but everyone loves Boris. He's going to be fine, don't you
think?
think?
Yeah, but I think a lot of the elite in London, they're kind of the liberal elite, and he was close to be followed by Lib Dems.
He's not really London, is it? I mean, it's Greater London. It's not like it's not like one of the real sort of liberal areas in the middle, is it? It's I don't know. We'll see. I mean, he won last time, so it can't be that lefty, can it?
Well, hopefully not, but who knows? It's a strange world out there, really, politically. Very strange world indeed. But I think it's going to be an interesting election night, actually, and I think no one sort of really knows what's going to happen. And apparently they're actually going after Rees-Mogg as well. The Lib Dems are really targeting him and think they can take him down.
Do you know, like most political nerds like me, I used to enjoy years ago kind of sitting up all night and watching the results roll in. I used to really have it and think it was a great night. Get some food, get some snacks, get a couple of beers and just kind of sit in and watch the results roll in. Now, to most normal people, that just sounds like the most boring thing on earth, but I used to love it. And then you become a kind of an activist, and before you know it, you're spending all your time at the polling stations and then at the evening to the counts. And you never get to sort of do that anymore, do you?
No, those days are quite sad, really.
Just got to sit there in a crowded room watching everybody look grumpy or happy depending on how the results seem to be coming in.
Yeah, but I think what doesn't help is in our area, where it's quite a safe area as such, so we kind of pretty much know often what the result's going to be. It must be a bit more tense and interesting in some of these close awards.
Yeah, I suppose.
So
not sure that we want to wish that on ourselves.
No, I'm certainly not wishing it on ourselves, but no. So, anyway, interestingly, Labour launched their campaign today, obviously kicking off their general election stance. So, Corbyn was vowing to transform Britain by taking on the few who run a corrupt system as he kicked off Labour's election campaign. There was a bit of jokes on Guido Fawkes today because he was saying how it's time for change, and they were saying that he'd turned into Trump and they put a little Trump haircut on him, which is quite funny. But anyway, he promised to rebuild public services and he hit out at tax dodgers, dodgy landlords, bad bosses and big polluters. He said it was the 12th of December poll was a once-in-a-generation chance to transform our country, and some ideas he broached were free prescriptions for all and free personal care for all over 65. So what do you think about that?
Well, I think for the first time ever, I agree with Jeremy Corbyn. It is a once-in-a-lifetime chance to make a change and get rid of the Labour socialist side forever. Because let's face it, nobody seems to like Jeremy Corbyn. I know he's got his momentum sort of hardcore, but everybody you talk to is like, who trusts this idiot? Aren't they? I mean, people feel pretty strongly about him, and I just got a feeling that we are heading to see the most massive drubbing of all time, and I really hope so. But there are a few things that could throw a spanner in the works, aren't there?
Well, I thought it was interesting as well. I don't know if you read, but Momentum are in trouble because they're a I think it's called non-partisan campaigner, and they're supposed to declare their spending with the Electoral Commission, which they haven't. And
surprised.
I think they now have, actually, as of like a few hours ago. But I think a lot of people were saying that they didn't think they were going to because the £20,000 fine is sort of a risk worth paying because they didn't kind of let on that they were funding all the kind of hard left members of the Labour Party. But I think what struck me about it was it sounded all nice, but you just have to look at the reality of it. I mean, free care for all over 65s. I mean, the adult social care budgets are massively under pressure already, let alone, when everyone's got to pay.
It doesn't matter what he promises. Every time they come along, they blame the same people, these mythical dodgy landlords, bad bosses and big polluters or tax dodgers. It's always the same lines, isn't it? This kind of mythical people that they build up like bogeymen, and then they use them to try and scare people. And I don't think it works anymore.
Yes and no. I think one thing that does work, and a message that they do say, although they're saying it a bit less strongly, but a message I saw on the internet today, which resonates with people, is, it will all be fine if we get people like Amazon to pay their fair share, because they say all these big guys that put money, and it is, I think it does. Normal people do feel frustrated, I suppose, that you do have these big companies that are able to manage their taxes offshore and pay less tax, where the normal person working in a shop paying PAYE has to pay tax.
Yeah, because these people are following the law and doing what any
I'm not
sensible
saying
person
it's
will do.
necessarily wrong. I'm just saying that people don't always think, people don't think it through, because if we made it hard for them, would they just disappear into another country and all of that? But I just think it's a message that resonates with people.
It resonates because Labour lead people up the garden path. Look, how long were they in power with Tony Blair and Gordon Brown? They were in power 13, 14 years. They had plenty of time to change the tax laws if they wanted to, and they did nothing to it, did they? A lot of the internet age and all the sales on the internet all grew under their watch. So they can't, that's come along later and say, oh, we're not happy with the amount of tax they pay. Well, why didn't you change the tax laws then? In fact, all they did was overcomplicate the tax laws, which creates more loopholes. Keep it simple, keep tax low, everyone will pay. It's not rocket science.
And that is true, and I think that's the problem, that, it is very complicated, and people have to employ people to help them understand it, really. And you're right, if it was a bit simpler, then it would maybe be easy for everyone to pay. If everyone paid 15%, and no matter who you were, then...
If all these companies were paying more taxes, they would pass the costs of those taxes onto their customers. So all you're doing by increasing taxation on big companies is increasing the cost of the goods for Amazon's customers and whatever other big corporation you want to name. There's no innocent parties here. If you increase taxes on a company, you increase costs to the consumer, and that's us. So who are they helping?
Well, no one. But I just think that's kind of a focus they've got. But I suppose the point is, really, once they go after Amazon and make them pay, then the next rung down will be poor, and then the next rung down, the next rung down. I suppose, at what point do you say that the poor person is the new rich person?
Well, what do you think about the Brexit Party? Because my opinion on the Brexit Party is that they're basically a busted flush. I don't think most people. This election is going to be about the Brexit, isn't it? I mean, there's no getting around it. Everyone, the Remainers have done this to themselves. They've stopped it for so long and caused such a lot of problems and annoyed everybody so much that everything in this election is now going to be about Brexit. And what's going to happen? Well, the Labour Party, whilst there are plenty of Remainers out there, their vote is going to be split, isn't it? A lot of people are going to go to the Lib Dems, who are the clear Remain party, and some of them are going to go to the Greens. And in the north, and some of the areas where Conservatives aren't traditionally strong, the Brexit Party are going to take great chunks out of the Labour vote. But the question is, how much effect will they have on the Conservatives?
Well, that's what worries me. I mean, it's just not going back, trying to harp on too much about Boris's seat again, but he's got a Brexit Party against him. Now, is it really helpful for them to be draining his vote and potentially letting a Lib Dem in?
No, they don't care. The Brexit Party, all this about therefore Brexit, I don't believe a word of it. If you vote for the Brexit Party, you're voting against Brexit, because they're the most likely way to weaken the Brexit vote. Let's face it, the Conservatives are the only party. How many seats are the Brexit Party going to win? 1, 2? Even UKIP at their strongest never actually won any at a general election, and that was when they were really cooking on all gas,
Yeah.
And if they couldn't do it, the Brexit Party are not going to do it under first past the post. So all that's really happening is you're weakening the Leave vote and any vote for the Brexit Party, and anyone who stands for the Brexit Party is actually making a stand against Brexit, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, I do agree there, and I think it's always been a bit of a cult of Farage, hasn't it? He's always been kind of a, this is who I am and I'm so important kind of guy.
Well, the way he talks, you see, he never concentrates on any detail. What Farage does is he says the most populist thing he can, the thing that he knows everyone's going to go, yes, that's right. It's the football chant approach to politics, isn't it? I enjoy listening to him speak sometimes, but I just don't think he's actually a good leader. If you put him in charge of something, I'm not confident he'd do a good job of it.
No, me either. Anyway, next thing was, I forgot I was me leading it then, I was waiting for you to speak. Twitter is to ban political advertising worldwide, with Chief Exec Jack Dorsey saying the reach of such messages should be earned and not bought. It represents yet another attempt by the left to silence Trump and Conservatives, according to the US President's campaign manager. However, Democrat Hillary Clinton argues it's the right thing to do for democracy in America and all over the world. So, what do we think on that?
Well, my view on
I didn't even know there was political advertising on Twitter, to be fair. I don't think I've ever seen it.
There is, yeah. My view on Hillary Clinton has pretty much stayed the same the whole time I've known her, and that is that anything she says is probably wrong. So you can take whatever the opposite position is to Hillary Clinton, and I think you're going to get it bang on the nail. I mean, the simple truth is the lefties are really keen to do this because they have quite a control over a lot of the outlets of communication, particularly in America, where they control almost all of the media. Only Fox really is the one that they don't, but all of the other kind of channels and outlets, all the big newspapers, they're all on the left. So America, which is one of the biggest democracies in the world, it really matters there. It really matters about what the outcome's going to be. And the only balance for conservatives and right of centre people is the internet. They use Facebook and they use Twitter and they use YouTube, and this is how the Conservatives get their message out. And so what the left want to do, knowing that they control all the other avenues of communication, is weaken the one where they're not too bothered. They're not bothered about Twitter, they've got all the others.
Yeah, but I wonder why Twitter has done it, though. They must obviously support the idea.
Well, Jack Dorsey is the most lefty of lefties. I mean, don't get me wrong, he's a capitalist because he runs Twitter and he makes a lot of money, but his positions are always on the left. Just listen to him speak. The man is absolutely a Democrat supporter in America, and that's the reason why, of course, he's going to do it. He knows that it's going to be effective for the Democrats in the United States, and that's exactly the reason.
But isn't it funny? They always these socialists always don't mind making loads of money themselves. They just don't want other people to.
Well, some of them are champagne socialists, of course. Some of them are just virtue signalling for what they think is a group that will support them. I don't think that that actually Jack Dorsey's right, because although Twitter is kind of left of centre and YouTube is kind of right of centre as a very general talking point, I think that the internet itself, I think there's plenty of right of centre voices, and any kind of leader on the internet who doesn't recognise that is losing a lot of custom.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. But I mean, to be honest with you, I don't really use Twitter much at all now anyway. I mean, I occasionally use it to catch up with news, but other than that, I don't particularly go on there. I think it's a bit dead now.
It's a cesspit. I mean, all Twitter really is people talking at one another, stating their in the bubble position or whatever they are, and being really relentlessly nasty about one another too. It's a horrible medium. I don't like it at all. No. I stopped using it. I still use it occasionally, but very, very rarely, really. I mean, most of my social media these days is Facebook and YouTube.
Yeah, but Mark Zuckerberg's just as bad, I think, isn't he?
He is, but he hasn't taken the same decision yet. The pressure's now on to him to do it. I mean, Facebook's political advertising has been really controlled now. And to give you an idea, I tried to do a political advert a month or a couple of months ago, slightly political, and I was told you can't do this, you've got to go through a bunch of checks. No problem. So I did all the checks. They ask you for all sorts of ID that you've got to send to them, and I did all those checks, and even all these weeks later, I have not yet been approved. Now, I know for a fact that some left-wingers who applied at about the same time as I did have been approved. It's easy to get into conspiracy theories, but it does seem to be a pattern.
It is interesting, yeah. Very interesting. So, the other thing is about, I suppose, kind of leads us into social media, really, because most of this has happened on there. But so MPs have become increasingly the target of abuse, and some women politicians are saying that they're bearing the brunt of it. So Labour MP Rachel Reeves, she's written a book about the history of women in Parliament, and she was saying how the first female MP to take their seat, Nancy Astor, had to push past jeering male colleagues in the chamber to get there. But the abuse has intensified in recent years, with death and rape threats a daily occurrence for women MPs. So more than 50 MPs, it's quite big in the news at the moment, because obviously the general election coming up, people are announcing whether they're standing and restanding, and more than 50 MPs so far have announced they're standing down, and 18 of them are female. A number of high-profile women have cited abuse as a factor for their decisions, and Culture Secretary Nicky Morgan has been subject to a number of threats, including police calls from a 64-year-old Robert Bidler telling her days are numbered, and he was jailed for 18 weeks. She said becoming an MP had a clear impact on her family, and the abuse had changed enormously in the past decade because of how strongly people feel about the current political situation. So I guess kind of it's a bit sad, really, that people feel like they can't continue in politics because of this. I suppose, is it kind of worse for women than men? And I mean, I don't think anyone would agree it's right to be subject to abuse. So it's kind of not really a discussion point in that sense. But I just thought it was interesting, really, and a bit sad.
Well, it's a big subject, and I think I've got mixed views on it, really, because let's first of all say, just so it's very clear for anyone who's listening, that we are never going to justify people being abusive or threatening towards anyone in public office. So wherever we go with this conversation, I want to make that clear at the outset. Nothing I say is justifying in any way that sort of behaviour. But I've got to say, as a side effect, that when you enter public office, you really have to expect a level of personal remarks. I mean, it's not right, it's not a great thing, but you've got to expect it. That's the way the world works. And I don't think it's any worse for women than for men, at all. I think we see it worse because we still are tied to the old ways and the kind of the ways where we want to protect women more than men, and the world has moved on a bit since that. We try and treat everyone equally now, and yet this bastion hangs on where we get very, very upset when there's a death threat to a woman. Now, of course, we should always get upset with death threats, but there are death threats to men all the time as well, in MPs, and not just MPs, at every level of local politics. Death threats and nasty threats and really unpleasant memes and personal attacks and lies and spin and attacks on the family. I mean, this is experienced at every level of politics, because when you put yourself out there, in the public view and make statements, some people disagree with you, and some of them disagree with you politely, and some of them, the only way they know how to disagree is a nasty way. And that can be quite extreme. I mean, we've seen it, haven't we?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I get that, and I get that you have to kind of have a level of being in the public eye and accepting some kind of criticism, but I think people do go too far, and I do think the internet's made it a lot worse. So I think that people say a lot more online than they'd ever say in public.
Of course they do.
And I think that sometimes, in a way, the social media's been a negative force, because people are so much braver behind a keyboard than they are in face. And I do think, I know you're saying it's not worse for females, but I do think people say, they often comment on females' appearance. They would never say that about a man. You would never ever hear someone saying, "Oh, he looks fat," or "Oh, he's ugly," or anything like that. But people seem to think it's okay to say that about females.
Yeah, no, I just don't think you notice as much, because I have absolutely heard people commenting on the fatness of male politicians, and the fact that they're balding, and the fact that, and I've heard women making remarks like, I bet he's got small genitals, or that sort of nasty comment. Some people seem to feel they always couch it as a joke. Don't get me wrong, but I've heard and seen just the same level of abuse that men and women, and not exactly the same, but the same level of abuse, definitely. And I think it's more jarring when you see it to a woman, because traditionally that's just not acceptable at all, is it? And as the world has moved on, that's one of the things I think that's hung back.
Yeah, I'm just trying to think about why that might be, though, because I suppose if you want equality, then I suppose, calling a man fat and a woman fat, there should be no difference, because neither of them are good.
Well, we still tell our children, don't we? We say to the boys, never ever hit a girl, don't we? And a lot of parents, not all parents, I accept, but certainly a lot of parents will say to a boy, if some other boy is tormenting you and punches you, and you ask him to stop and he doesn't stop, punch him back. I mean, I know that's perhaps not politically correct now, but it is the advice that good fathers often give to their sons, I think. Now, we never tell them to hit a girl back, do we? Because there is this holdover of this different way that we treat men and women and their interactions.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more complex than that, though. I'm just trying to think it through, really, in my mind as to what it could be. I think it's deeper in the sense that women are kind of almost judged on their appearance, and so I suppose if you then criticise it, then you're really being more personal than you are perhaps with a man who's just kind of expected to get on regardless of what he looks like. But in a way, that's really messed up as well, because men do have feelings, and they're not going to just be able to constantly take personal attacks, and that worries me too, in the sense that we're just expecting men to be so strong. I just don't know, it's just complicated, really.
I don't think it's something we can stop. And don't get me wrong, we should aspire to encourage people to behave better towards one another. But I don't think that human nature is ever going to allow us to completely stop, particularly in the countries with free speech, We're never going to be able to completely stop people being pretty nasty about one another when they disagree. Look at any online chat board discussion, Facebook or anywhere else, and look at how nasty the opposing sides get about sometimes the most trivial things, not even necessarily serious things, but they really turn on one another and it escalates so fast. I think part of it is because when you're on a keyboard, as you said, you don't see the same visual clues and you don't have the same visual concerns. You know, if you're down a pub and I walk up to some bloke and say to him something that someone said to me today, quite extreme thing, I'd just get punched almost certainly. You know, you'd have to be ready to deal with the consequences of your words. But on the internet, you're free of consequences, so you can say what you like, and that does have negative effects.
Yeah, and I think as well, like, that is probably a bit more as to why the problem is with women, because I've often seen on Twitter, like, some men can be so nasty, and you think if they said that in public, people would really condemn them for it, but they seem to just be able to say it online, like, with no consequence.
Yeah, well, I mean, I've seen just as bad comments from women as I've seen from men. In some cases, worse. In fact, perhaps there are fewer really nasty women, I'm not sure, but perhaps there are. But if there are, the ones that are really nasty are really nastier. I mean, when you're up against a lady who really has got a kind of bad way about them, the things they say, there just doesn't seem to be any controls at all. They just seem to think the most extreme thing is appropriate.
Maybe there's just a lot of really horrible people around.
Yeah, well, I mean, perhaps I think maybe the internet is changing everything, and I think it's going to take a very long time for the world to come to terms with those changes, because it's still quite a new development, and we haven't evolved to deal with communication in this way. It's quite new, and so I think we're still finding our way.
Yeah, and I think the problem is, I think part of the problem with the abuse now is it kind of is so invasive. So, like, because of the social media element. So I suppose in the past, you know, the abuse probably did happen in the past, but you might kind of be out on the street and you might have got some guy shouting something horrible at you. But then that was it, and then you kind of went home and you were in the safety of your home, and you could kind of feel a bit upset, but you could forget it. But now you know, everyone's got their phone with them all the time, so the abuse is there all the time, 24/7. And I think that's a problem with a lot of kids as well, because, you know, you used to get bullied at school, but come home and you were fine. But now you come home and the bullying follows you. Yeah. So it's kind of like you can never shut off from the world.
That 24/7 thing is one of the things human beings have got to come to terms with, because I don't think we're going to stop doing it, so we're going to have to work out how we deal with it, because you're right, it's really overpowering sometimes for people. And just to say, just one quick point though, you said perhaps there was the same abuse in the past. Well, I think we know there was, because your description of, was it Nancy Astor?
Yeah.
Had to push past jeering male colleagues in the chamber to get there. Right? So we know that these things did happen in the past, but we didn't all have the ability to tell one another about them and psych them up.
Well, that's slightly different as well, because the Nancy Astor thing, she's not talking about random people saying it to her. They were actually her male colleagues. So actually, it's not really the same comparison, is it?
Yeah, and we weren't there. We don't know what happened. I mean, I regularly see on the internet a couple of people having an argument, and then one of them's like, "Why are you patronising me?" or "Why are you bullying me?" And then the other one is like, "I'm not patronising you or bullying you, I'm arguing with you. You're patronising and bullying me." And before you know it, they're accusing one another of this escalating series of things that they shouldn't do. And it just seems to me that sometimes these terms are used to shut down debate if you're not winning. I'm not sure. So, and getting between the ones that are valid and the ones that aren't isn't always that easy, because you're drawn to want to defend people you know, people that have the same beliefs as you, sometimes incorrectly.
It's difficult. Anyway, hopefully everyone's found that interesting tonight. We've kind of been a bit wombling through it and talking, but I hope people have found that interesting. So just anyway, say good night and then we'll be over. So good night from me.
Okay, good night from me. So I've been a bit croaky tonight. I think we've all got this kind of winter cold. Hopefully you guys who are listening are feeling much better than we are.
Okay, thank you. Good night.
Bye.